In the continued quest to raise adequate awareness of child molestation and its prevention, I had a talk with Ryan Mutu, who was a professor in the Caribbean for over 15 years. We explored the question of who is responsible for protecting children from sexual abuse. We particularly looked at the role the school system plays in raising awareness and how the schools in the Caribbean address the issue of child sexual abuse. So, Ryan, taking the time out to talk to me today. Child molestation has been an issue for decades, and I know that you have been educator for a number of years, 15 years. Schools plays a major role in the development of our children's lives.
Yes.
Educators not only involved in their academic advancement, also they're entrusted with the responsibility of caring for our children, including their social and emotional wellness. Being an educator, what instances have you seen where our children are impacted?
Children from all walks of life. It doesn't matter your color, your skin. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter what religion, what background, what walks of life we come to. They all been sexually abused as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are good at hiding it. Some of them will show it.
Right.
From day one, some would rebel. And this is not only towards female. This is mostly towards males, children too, being sexual abuse.
Right.
It can be by an older brother. It can be by an older cousin. It can be by stepfathers. Most times these things are happening by stepfather or some elderly who is living in the home or who are visiting there that occur these here. In instant, as being an educator or being a teacher for 15 years, we see change of pattern in children. We see them drop back in their educational work because this thing rests on their mind, because they do not know where to go, because most times they're being threatened as children. Mm-hmm. They're being told not to say anything because I'm going to do this. Especially some of them are being told by their whoever done this to them, yes, that the children or the younger brother and sister, if you don't, then we will do this to them. So as the being as a protector, guardian for those smaller generation, they try to hide it and accept. They think it's a norm, or did I do something wrong, or I played a bad role, that is why this is happening to me. But I do not think it's acceptable for them. But you have to let children be safe to know that if this happened to them, they can speak to somebody.
Yeah. So how have the school or your system were able to identify instances where these students were abused, and what changes or warning signs presents themselves to you while the students are in your care?
If the students are in our care and they've been abused at home and we discovered, because you wouldn't be right away, they would not come down. Nobody would come to you right away and say, you know what, I've been sexually abused.
Right.
It will take a pattern, a period of time with that, dear. As I said, if you see their attitude change and they start to rebel towards you, then you know that this was a sweet child. Why is this child attitude change?
Right.
If you see their appearance change, well, they just come to work anyhow, come to school, and then they just look like that. Then this child is not even being showered in the morning. They're not using deodorant. They just start smelling because they just don't care anymore. Some of them academically would drop back. Some of them would be constantly late. Then all these are pattern and sign you look for, especially if you know a child. And you're aware that this was a really nice child, or even if this was a bad child, you know the pattern that they would go to. But when they started to change sexually, being abused, then you see different changes in their body, then you take step. You either recommend for them to go to the counselor of the school. If you see that that is not helping you with calling, some places have the religious council from the church, because most, like living in the Bahamas, they were a very religious group. They're all Christian, and there's so many Catholic church there, all different types of church there. So you call in the elder, whichever church they go to counsel that person, to being aware of what is the problem. Then you would get the mother involved. If it is much more serious, like in a sexually problem, then you would get the police involved. But the district superintendent also would get involved. They would try to investigate who or when or how it happened. You would get the police involved also.
So basically, you find it effective collaborate if the school and school counselor is not able to get the
resolve the
matter. Thank you.
Yes.
Resolve the matter. Then you collaborate with outside sources where the student or the child will feel more comfortable speaking with an individual, like the school and church counselor. Okay.
So we bring in outside people to speak with them to get to the bottom of it. Or sometimes, even though they're not safe of speaking to a counselor, they may speak with another teacher who they feel much more safer with. So the relationship with a teacher and a student, they may be able to open and say something to that there. But then as soon as that teacher heard that information, they have to take drastic change of going to the principal, going to the counselor.
So they have to take action.
Yes, they have to take action right away to protect that child. Sometimes children would be sexually abused and then became pregnant, especially for a female. If we suspected that, we have to take them to the government clinic. You have to get them examined. You have to find out if they're pregnant or they're not.
Okay, so to prevent or to lower the number of students that are being sexually abused, is there a specific program in school to educate these students, to let them know, what to expect and how they can react or deal with instances where they are being attacked by an abuser, or the abuser is actually trying to lure them into sexual acts?
Yes, we did have many educational program where we have social study. They taught them how to protect the sexual in the event of a sexual abuse. They have religious education, which will be taught in every school. It's a compulsory subject that every child has to take religious education, and also early childhood education. They also enlighten that. Some subjects go into depth, where they would tell them how to prevent it, what to look for, what sign to do.
To gather more in-depth knowledge and how the school system raises awareness of child molestation, further research was carried out. I met with school counselors and educators in New York who shed light on the New York school system role in raising awareness, which is consistent with the takeaway from the discussion I had with New York-based psychologist Dr. Claudius Davis and Professor Benjamin on WeFM Radio.
But the parents alone is not the only ones who I think can help in these situations. We can look back at the schools because the children spend so many time in school every day.
We do get kids that have experienced this, and what they call it in my area is articulation. We sit down with the psychologist and the guidance counselors, and they give us a brief history. We don't get a tremendous amount of detail, but if there was some sort of incident like this in the past, we're made aware, and it's tough being a content area teacher. If you teach math, or if you teach social studies, or if you teach science, you can be kind, you can be nice, but they essentially put a wall up where it's like, don't say anything, but keep an eye on them and let us know upstairs if there's anything that you see that's not right, in their behavior. And I get it; it makes sense because, we're not trained to deal with heavy issues like this. We're trained to teach math or social studies, but the thing is, there's a gap because we're the content. Our mission in the classroom, besides making the kids feel like they're in a loving environment, is primarily to teach that subject, whatever it is. They're supposed to learn, and then there's that emotional piece that's dealt with in a different department, I guess you could say.
Right.
And largely, the experience that the kids have is dependent upon the parents' openness to receive help, because what I've noticed happens is when there's a real big problem, the parents will shut off and forbid the child from talking to certain individuals who maybe start to get somewhere, And Claudius, I don't know if you've encountered that, but
I encounter that every day.
yeah, parents can be at the obstruction, and because the parents have the primacy of rights, they can actually get in the way of institutions that are there to help. And that's a tough one.
Is willing to tell his or her story, then the educators have no clue as to what's going on at home, and sometimes it can be very quiet. Leslie.
Okay, sorry, I have a question. In schools, they teach children to call 911 if their parents hit them or if there's a physical abuse. Do they teach children the same if they're sexually abused or sexually molested? Are all children aware of what sexual molestation is? Do they expose them to it or raise awareness about it in school?
I mean, we do programs that help a student to understand that, like safe touching and stuff like that. So teachers do that as well as counselors do that. But
what I'm trying to bring across, because in the process, my mission is really to look at prevention. How do we prevent this or reduce the number of cases of child molestation? And what I've realized is that most times when it happened, it's new to the child. They weren't aware. They had very little, if any, awareness. And as a result, they're really shocked. It throw them into, they're going to shock, and as a result, freeze. And how do we prepare someone so that when, they're exposed to it initially, it will not be such a shock to them and they would respond in a way to defend themselves?
Well, I mean, in terms of, and that's where counseling, whether it be in the school, at the school-based level or outside, but in many cases, I think that children, they receive, the best would be for them to also be receiving outside counseling as well as because the school-based counseling is limited. I think the issue is, how do we get these children early? Right. What can we do in terms of education to be able to do that? And I think, for example, where I am, we have, a special ed program. Mm-hmm. So we have money allocated specifically for that. As a matter of fact, in New York State, it is now mandated that we have to teach principles such as resiliency and mental health issues. We have to talk to children about mental illness. And so it is part of the curriculum. So teachers now have that responsibility of actually, it's giving them more flexibility to begin to get into these darker areas in terms of actually having the discussion. Of course, it's not an in-depth discussion, but right. At least you can talk to children about depression, about anxiety, and then you can begin to talk about the causes of it.
One other thing, and I don't know if this came up or not, but by law, at least in New York, where Claudius and I are, mm-hmm. We are all trained in, this is one thing that actually, might be addressing your question. We're actually trained as mandated reporters of abuse. So we're legally responsible as individuals in the classroom or in the school if we hear or see something that indicates that there's abuse. We don't have a choice. We're obligated to notify our superiors within 24 hours and to do so in writing. And then they're obligated by law, or they're personally responsible to follow up on it. And those laws have been in place now since I began teaching. We had to get trained in it, so that's at least, almost 20 years. And I've seen it work. I've seen girls that were cutting because, they had some familial issues, and a teacher notices some marks on their arms or notices, and then says something. Next thing you know, there's a full investigation going. I've seen kids with welts, and a lot of times, sometimes a kid is in football or a kid is in field hockey and got a bunch of bruises, and it's nothing. And then other times they got kicked around the night before, and it turns out it was a good thing that a teacher noticed something and said something. So I think we're catching it more than we ever have been, which might be why we're so alarmed at what we're seeing. But no, it's not perfect. I guess that's why the book is necessary, right?
Right. And it also, too, the problem with that, yes, we have to report, and that's part of what I do, because usually in my building, I'm one of the persons who have to actually make the call to CPS. So children really suffer, and they go through a lot, and I don't think we as adults pay as much attention to the plight of children.
Not until it happens.
And it usually is too late when it happens.
Too late, right. And now we have to take corrective measures by helping them to cope, develop the necessary coping mechanism to deal with the issue on hand.
So now we're left with many questions. Can the school system do more to raise the necessary awareness? Or should children be protected from the dark topic of sexual abuse? Should the school system leave the onus on the parents to enlighten the children on the topic of sexual abuse? What if it is the parents or family members carrying out the act? Are parents willing to work with the school system to deal with the issue? Or the secret has to be kept to protect the family reputation? What age is age appropriate to introduce this topic? These questions and more will be addressed in future videos.